Hi everyone, welcome to Outgrow's Market of the Month podcast. I'm your host Saksham Sharda. I'm the creative director at Outgrow. And for this month, we're going to interview Rand Fishkin, who is the co-founder of SparkToro. So Rand, instead of an awkward introduction, we're just going to start with a rapid fire round so as to break the ice.
Love it.
Try to keep your answers to one word or one sentence only.
Okay.
All right. So the first question, how long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
28 minutes.
That was precise. What's your middle name?
Rand.
Rand Fishkin.
My first name is S. It's very awkward.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, just the letter S. It's really strange.
Really? And why is that? No, I'm going to break the rapid fire just to ask why
that. Various reasons, but mostly my dad was trying to game airline mileage points in the late 1970s.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right, next question. How many hours of sleep can you survive on?
Minimum 7.
That's interesting. Okay. One thing you had to cancel in 2020 because of coronavirus.
Ooh. One thing I had to cancel. Apoliticism. That's
wow. That was deep. You took us really far down. Okay, sure. What do you do when you're angry?
Either I tweet or I stew.
Okay, pick one. Neil Patel or Gary Vaynerchuk?
No, thank you.
Okay, the biggest mistake of your career?
Stepping down as CEO from Moz.
Oh, okay. Giving presents or getting presents?
Oh, giving presents.
For sure, me too. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
1, but it is a large espresso maker.
Okay. And the most valuable skill you've learned in life?
Kindness.
That's interesting. Okay. How many tabs do you have open on your browser?
As few as possible. 4 right now.
Okay. Fill in the blank. An upcoming marketing trend is blank.
Episodic content.
Oh, okay. And finally, your favorite Tiger King character?
I've never seen the show. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, that's the end of the rapid fire round, but those were some very interesting answers that we're obviously just gonna put in tweets.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the bigger questions now. Let's actually start from scratch. Let's start with the name. How did you come up with the name SparkToro? What does it represent to you?
Yeah, so we had a bunch of criteria around our naming convention, and I would actually encourage other marketers or entrepreneurs who are starting things to do this. One of the big ones was we wanted 0 Google search results for the name when we started. Oh. So as soon as we registered the domain and made it live, the next day we were automatically number 1 for our own name, which is great. The other criteria, we wanted something that was easy to say and spell. So easily pronounceable. Ideally, we wanted 2 syllables. We ended up with 3, but pretty close. And we wanted something that could mean anything. So it didn't have any previously associated, preconceptions that people might have around it. So SparkToro could be anything, right? We could do or spell or do or be anything. And we wanted that because when we were early starting out, we didn't know if we were going to change our mental model around what the company might do in those first 6 to 12 months. And before we validated what our customers wanted, right, we didn't know. So yeah, and the domain was available. And then my favorite part of it is so the inspiration for the name comes from the Japanese cartoon Totoro.
Okay. I haven't seen it, but okay, that makes sense.
I
There's so
highly
many.
recommend it. It's awesome. You can watch it with kids. It's
Mm.
great.
So it's kind of a universal signifier. So it could actually, because the moment like one goes to your website, I start thinking, why is it called SparkToro? And it's because it lights a spark. I don't know. Like, so it's like
Sure. Yeah.
everyone makes their own meaning. So that's
Exactly.
nice.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
didn't want something where if you heard the name, you automatically had an association. We wanted you to have to
Mm.
sort of discover what SparkToro was.
I suppose like because Google is a certain number, right? Google is like a unit of measurement, but I suppose when Google first came into being, no one actually knew what it meant until
Right.
someone actually. You're right, because
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
such a big word.
even something like Apple or Amazon, like, what
Mm,
they, those words are other nouns, right? The Amazon
mm,
River or the apple, the fruit. But um, yeah, those businesses, I think Netflix is the closest one to where you
yeah.
instantly know what it is based on the name. But I had gone down that road with Moz. Moz originally was called SEO Moz,
Mm,
and that was quite limiting. In fact,
I can imagine. Yeah. Because outgrow is called outgrow, which leaves a lot of possibility for us to do a
yeah.
lot of things in the future, because we could literally be about anything as we go along. But I get like how Spark Tour is even more different from that, a step ahead. But that's a great point to like, we'll make some quizzes out of that, but let's see. The next question is, at what point in your life does your fascination with audiences start? Because Spark Tour is about audiences, but you must have had some sort of a fascination with audiences.
Oh yeah, I think my entire adult life, right? Once I
Mm,
started building websites, which was even in at the end of high school and into early college, right? I
mm,
wanted to know more about the people who were visiting those websites and how to make the website more successful for the people who, contracted me to build them. And then I wanted to understand how we could get more traffic to them, which is how I got into SEO. And then it was about understanding those audiences and figuring out, how do I go reach them in places that might not be Google. Um,
mm.
and so, yeah, it's been I suppose, a almost lifelong interest.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. The next question is, how do you identify new ways to source traffic and new avenues or areas to market in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, Saksham, you do this at Outgrow, right? You try and get a deep understanding of who the audience is that you're targeting, right? Who are we trying
Mm,
to attract to this website, to this campaign, to this idea? And then you want to go discover, based on who those people are, you want to go discover the publications, communities, social accounts, YouTube channels, podcasts, events, all that kind of stuff, right? That they listen to, watch, follow, read. Um, and this is exactly what SparkToro does, right?
mm,
If you I'm sure you've run a few searches, right? It's free to run some searches, but you can go and basically type in like, yeah, I want to see what electrical engineers in the UK listen to.
mm,
I want to see what fiction authors in California are reading. I want to know what websites are popular with architects in Canada. And SparkToro tells you that based on our database of tens of millions of social and web profiles.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. The next question is, what do you define yourself as? A marketer, an entrepreneur, a businessman? What's the term you would use?
Gosh, I generally use founder, which I think is
Mm,
similar to entrepreneur. I am a marketer, absolutely. Businessman, I don't know. It sounds kind of like I should be doing
yeah.
coke in the 80s. So I don't know. In a bathroom on Wall Street, I'm not. I don't feel like a businessman,
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was
right?
going
It's
to
like
say
how
because
words
yeah.
get different words get these different associations with them.
Yeah, for sure. And over time they change, the associations
Right.
as well. So, but when you say founder, it's more, again, like saying SparkToro, it's like more open to what you can do once you're a founder, because you can do many things then, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a
It's
good point.
yeah. Hmm. What do you mean by when you say, because I went through your bio on the website, you say you want to make SparkToro a great company, but by your own peculiar standards. What are these standards?
So I am looking for a company that is very conscientious about the way that it participates in the world, right? About who it helps and how it helps them, about how it hopefully makes the world better. And by that I mean, in particular, SparkToro's goal is to help small and medium businesses, new businesses, early stage companies, small and medium agencies and consultants. I want those businesses to be able to grow more effectively, to target their audiences more effectively. And I want them to do that, I hope, through moving away from this exclusive focus on marketing through Facebook and Google. Like I think Facebook and Google's stranglehold duopoly over online
Duopoly, yeah, I read that. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm not into that, right? I think that's a negative thing for the world. I think it's bad for the economy. I think it's bad for,
Mm.
if you're into macroeconomics, right? You know that generally monopoly power and a few companies owning all the wealth and influence is a really bad thing. And I think it has been really bad for innovation. I think Facebook and Google more so than Facebook, but they were incredibly innovative first like 10 to 15 years of life when they were competing. And that has not continued, right? Like we don't see, there's not these incredible, amazing products like Google Maps and Google Earth, the Google Earth project, and stuff like that. It's gotten to be really about how do we add people to clicking on our ads more and more, and that doesn't excite me. And I also hope that as SparkToro shows marketers other channels and publications and avenues to reach their audiences, my hope is not just that will help those companies and those marketers, but it will also, I hope, help a lot of those publications. Like, how cool would it be if the Outgrow podcast, right, a much more pitched and influential place and like its audience, and instead of, whatever, some, Facebook community, right? I would love to see that. I think that would be spectacular, right? Across the board. So that's what I mean by my own peculiar criteria. And, I also have, I have high hopes that SparkToro can remain small in terms of the number of people who work on it full time, but large in terms of its influence and in terms of the positive good that it can do, and hopefully also be financially successful.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think with the shift in the world power, because we have been reading about for the past few years how the European Union has been challenging these monopolies that American companies have held for a long time. With MasterCard, that was one thing, but they also sued Google, the Commissioner for Competition, who usually goes after them.
Right.
So it is a marker of the times. So yeah, it makes complete sense. The peculiar standards you have for what you think should be a great company. They shouldn't be peculiar, though. I mean, I guess when you wrote that bio.
Yeah. Well, I think unfortunately, right, the culture for a long time in the startup world has been kind of this like, oh, become a $1 billion unicorn. And I just have no interest in that. Like that is very far from what I want to do. I would say too, to your point about the European Union, the crazy part and really the frustrating part to me is Facebook and Google were able to insert enough lobbying power in the EU's regulatory rules that they got GDPR passed in a way that essentially prevents anyone from ever competing fairly against Google and Facebook.
Oh,
right?
really? I had no idea.
Yeah. So GDPR, I mean, Facebook and Google sent, tons of reps and funded all these experts and all these studies to essentially make it so that the privacy policy rules, and it's not just GDPR, the California Privacy Act as well does this, essentially means that only the big companies that have already collected all the data, right, from all of us can keep doing highly targeted advertising. Nobody else will ever be able to enter those markets because nobody else will ever be able to collect that personalized data and store it and use it to serve advertising, et cetera, right? Only Google and Facebook have both the resources and got there before the legislation, right? Built these big networks before the legislation. So really, what GDPR is just a big moat building exercise for Google and Facebook. And it's pretty infuriating. Like if I were a European citizen, even as a non-European, I am infuriated. Like they basically said, no European company will ever compete with Google and Facebook.
Wow.
Who writes laws like that? I mean, obviously the people who wrote it didn't understand what they were doing.
I mean, the European bureaucracy is legendary, so I have no idea. Like, it probably doesn't trickle down if we don't understand what's happening. But it's interesting, though, because like we talk about these monopolies as if they've existed for a long time, but then when we were to look at it, it's just 15 years of Facebook. And for it to have gotten so big in 15 years must also at some point mean that it might actually not last 15 more years, because its timeline seems pretty short to me. Something that's risen so fast. What do you think the future is then? That's what the next question is. Like, say 20 years from now, are we still going to see a duopoly? Are we going to see, just Google and Facebook? Or do you think they will collapse? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it is really up to voters and political parties and politicians. I think it's, it's in the hands of voters to choose whether they want to elect more progressive, more directly antitrust enforcing, people to office. And weirdly, in the United States right now, it is somewhat bipartisan. There is some pretty decent bipartisan agreement that there should be more enforcement. I don't know whether that will get more partisan over time. I suspect it probably will, because almost everything does in the United States. But my sense is right now we have an opportunity in the next few years, right, for the two major political parties in the United States to sort of have some agreement on, hey, we crafted these antitrust laws. We need to update them for the digital age, and we need to fairly apply them to the companies that are where they're relevant.
For sure. And I read in the news about them calling again and again to Senate hearings. They called all the monopoly, like Facebook, Google. But I don't know what happened off it. Like, I know it happened. I know the hearing happened, but I don't know what happened after that.
Well, so I think the hearing is much more of a sort of public dressing down and then a discovery process. And then the work of applying the law goes to courts and judges and the Justice Department and the attorneys general for the individual states. And there is, my understanding is there's action pending from a number of parties, including the state's attorneys general and the DOJ. And I think there's some, the House Judiciary Committee. All of them are looking into simultaneously, anti-competitive monopolistic practices.
Okay, so what would you say, like, in the current scene, I don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
What would you say are promising companies that could be alternatives to this duopoly? I'm not saying they have to be companies that are doing the same thing. I'm just saying, what do you see as promising companies from your peculiar standards that you were talking about earlier? So give us some examples.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the interesting part, right? The way I see it is what you don't want is, hey, what's an alternative to Facebook and Google? Can I go advertise on Twitter, or could I go advertise with TikTok? Instead, the way you ideally want to think about it is, what are hundreds or thousands of publications and sources of influence that I could go do marketing on that would have potentially similar or even greater reaches for a lower cost and higher return on investment. It's just going to take me more time to do it. Right. So it's not, my advice is not go look for one platform to replace your Facebook ads. It's go look for dozens and dozens of publications and people and places to, not just advertise, but do more creative kinds of marketing. Pitch to be a guest on a podcast, right? Pitch an op-ed to a newspaper, to a publication, to a magazine, right? Online or off. Go find social accounts that reach your audience and go build relationships with those people so that they're interested in amplifying your announcement, the work that you're doing, et cetera, right? Go find a website that your audience visits, do some co-marketing there, maybe write a guest piece for them. There's just a lot more opportunities under what I sort of term the like content marketing meets digital PR meets outreach umbrella. That I think are way more valuable and interesting than just move your ads from this one platform to this other platform.
So it's a lot of groundwork, like that one has to do, like because as opposed to just more,
right. It's more sort of research to uncover those sources. But this is what I hope things like SparkToro can help with, right? Because instead of running a big survey and trying to get the audience in there and then account for survey bias and figure out what are all the sources our audience pays attention to, and right, that discovery process can be brutal and it's not generally very accurate. My hope is SparkToro and other audience intelligence tools, there are some out there, can help solve that problem for you in seconds, right? You can just say, oh yeah, I'm trying to target these people or people who care about this, or this publication sent us great traffic. Where do I find more publications like that can send me more great traffic? And I think those types of, if we can effectively solve that problem at scale for a lot of people, then the barrier to entry of that more distributed, more fair, more high ROI, less give the duopoly money sorts of marketing and advertising could become the standard.
And crucially, like what you're saying is also that when one looks up, when one does these searches on SparkToro, it's also not just from the objective of targeting the people, but also because you're passionate about that industry. So you actually want to know where these people are, the ones you want to connect with, and you actually want to start a discussion there. So it seems like less commercial and more like,
authentic.
Trying to connect with the authentic. There you go. Couldn't find the word. Authentic.
No, that's exactly right. Like even if you're not going to go advertise in these places or directly do whatever outreach, I think it's still super valuable, especially as a founder and an entrepreneur, right? To go to these communities, go to these publications, go to these people, follow them, pay attention to what they're doing, right? See the words and phrases that they're using, the ways that they describe the problem, the problems that they're talking about, the subjects that are of interest to them. That work, right? Understanding your community, your potential customers is not just great for marketing alone. It's also great for product development and customer development and building better personas and understanding how to, craft creative and craft messages that are going to resonate. I think that's a core part of the early stage research that you should do around any launch or new product or new company.
So it's like a two-way kind of relationship because you also contribute to that community that you are finding. So
I hope so,
yeah. Interesting. Okay, so the next question is, and this is kind of a weird question because the SEO industry has like sprung like again, like it's something like recent. If you were to look at time as like, a bigger thing. What do you think the future of SEO is?
I suspect we're going to see sort of a trajectory very similar to what we've seen the last 5 or 10 years, which is sort of increasing maturation, right? So, the early SEO industry was very very immature. I mean that both in terms of individual people's behavior, my own included, right, and the behavior of the community more broadly, and the tactics that were used. We've seen in the last 5 years way less black hat and manipulative stuff, way more embrace of, well, let's get technical things right, and let's get content right, and let's serve your users well, and let's make searchers happier, and let's structure content correctly, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's going to be the direction for a good while. I don't see search going away. So I think SEO and search marketing broadly is going to continue to increase, probably not quite as fast as it's grown the last 6 or 7 years. I think we're going to see that slow down a little bit, just because there's two big forces going on. One, Google is not growing as fast as it was, and that's mostly because there's just not more internet users for Google to capture. They've got whatever 90+% market share around the world, so there's not that many more people to get.
Well, there's China. Just kidding. They've never reached that.
If the Chinese government stops enforcing Baidu's domination there,
the Great Wall of China firewall.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is still the case, but I know that when I was in China, gosh, this is a number of years ago now, 2009, 2010, when I did a search. This wasn't true in Hong Kong, but I think we were in Shanghai. And when I was there and I did a search on Google, I got redirected news results.
To news results? Google news results?
No, Baidu. To Baidu.
Oh, to Baidu. Oh, okay. Huh.
Yeah, to Baidu's results, right? And this was essentially like a government ISP program. Like if you searched on Google, you got sent to the Baidu results. Like, whoa, hang on. You don't want to search Google. We're sending you over to Baidu. But yeah, so I think that is one force. And then the other is Google themselves is competing with publishers, right? Whereas whatever it is, 9 out of 10 searches 10 years ago resulted in a click. Today, it's less than half of all searches result in a click. So even though Google continues to grow, albeit more slowly than they grew the last 20 years, they are essentially cannibalizing the traffic opportunity for themselves.
But when you mentioned the duopoly, because you were talking about it earlier, would you think that one of the ways the duopoly faces the challenge is because the Chinese internet is as big as the rest of the world's internet? So there's because that's the only challenge, the one you mentioned when you say the IP is being redirected to Baidu. Right. That is the only significant challenge this duopoly has.
So it would be a significant challenge if Baidu were sort of, competing against Google in India or in Europe or in Mexico and Canada or something like that, right? Or in the United States. But it's not, right? It's very severely limited right now by raw geography. And so it's not really a competition. Like Google can't really compete in China. Baidu can't really compete anywhere else. It's not quite, it's sort of like saying whatever AT&T's phone lines were competing with, I don't know who the union's provider of phone lines were in the, during the Cold
War. No, but in
War.
the sense then, because the example I draw for this is the sudden rise of TikTok, which is which is coming from a different kind of sphere, but it's kind of the same. Baidu's not competing now, but do you suppose in the future they might try to compete?
Oh, I'm sure they will keep trying to compete. And I think Google will keep trying to make, an entrance in which, obviously you can see Google's employees very frustrated about the sort of double talk around that. But yeah, as for what's going to happen 20 years from now, I am not going to speculate at all. 20 years ago, it seemed like there were going to be 7 popular web search engines, right?
Yeah, things change so fast. Well, there's one thing that the original question, actually, I just changed it. The original question was, where do you see yourself in 20 years from now? Do you think you can answer that?
Gosh, I have my have my hopes and aspirations. Like in an ideal world, I would love to see SparkToro become, a company that is financially successful for its investors and for the team, and something that's helped nudge a lot of marketing towards a broader stance. And I think it would be amazing if I were probably not retired, but perhaps not in a not in a full-time sort of leading the organization role, and instead had a team of people to help. But I would love to be involved with this company for a very long time. I was at Moz for 17 years. And I don't,
And then came your biggest mistake.
Yeah. Well, my biggest mistake came 13 years into that.
Okay.
But I would love to be with this company for a long time, right? And to see it turn into something positive and successful, especially because it's not venture backed. I would also love to see the model that SparkToro potentially sets be something that other entrepreneurs and founders consider.
Okay. So 20 years from now, I hope to join you on this podcast once again too.
How wonderful would that be?
I'll actually write down the date and I'll set a Google notification if Google exists by 20 years.
We can just do it every 5 years. Like 20 is so long.
But it'd be more, but sure, 5 is even better. But 20 would be more historic. But that's the end of the podcast. Thanks everyone for joining us for this month's episode of Outgrow's Market of the Month. That was Rand Fishkin, the co-founder of SparkToro. Thanks for joining us, Rand.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Do check out SparkToro for more details, and we'll see you once again next month with another Market of the Month. Thanks.